Hey man, setting emotional boundaries isn't about barking orders or demanding space. It's about owning your energy so deeply that people adjust to your presence without needing to be told. A lot of men think boundaries are built with volume, with confrontation, with loud refusals. But real masculine power doesn't yell, it withdraws calmly. It speaks less, but carries more weight. And that weight comes from one thing: emotional self-control. Because when you learn to hold your frame without raising your voice, you're not just setting boundaries, you're commanding respect. Most men go silent out of fear, but the high-value man goes silent out of certainty. He knows what his limits are, he knows what crosses the line. And when a woman starts pushing, testing, or trying to control the dynamic emotionally, he doesn't retaliate, he pauses. He lets her reveal her energy fully. He observes, he listens, and then without insult, without escalation, he pulls back. Not to punish, not to play games, but because his peace matters more than temporary comfort. And when she feels that calm removal, that's when she feels the boundary without you having to raise your voice. Boundaries aren't about control, they're about clarity. And the quieter your clarity, the more powerful it becomes. You don't need to announce your standards 50 times. You embody them once, and let your consistency do the rest. When you say, "I don't argue," and then you actually don't argue, that silence is louder than shouting. When you say, "I don't explain myself" twice, and then you remove yourself from the conversation after repeating something once, that's leadership. That's how you train the people around you to treat you right without ever raising your tone. One of the deepest forms of strength is the ability to hold stillness when you're being emotionally provoked. That's where most men lose the frame. A woman starts testing, pushing buttons, going cold or hot in cycles, and he takes the bait, he gets defensive, he starts talking too much. He tries to fix what she hasn't earned. But the man who's mastered emotional boundaries, he lets her storm pass. He doesn't match her chaos, he anchors it. Because he knows her emotional surge isn't an invitation to argue, it's a test of his center. And here's where it gets real. You don't need to raise your voice when your energy speaks for you. When you've done the work to know who you are, what you'll tolerate, what you'll what you're willing to walk away from, you stop explaining everything. You start moving differently. She snaps at you, and instead of snapping back, you look her in the eye and say, "I don't respond to that energy, period." And then, you leave the space. No fight, no lecture, just silence that forces her to reflect. That move, that's what earns real respect. Emotional boundaries aren't just about what you won't accept, they're about what you consistently model. You don't tell people to respect your peace. You move like peace is sacred. You don't tell her not to play games. You never reward them. You don't tell her to stop testing your patience. You never trade your calm for her chaos. And when you embody that rhythm, she learns fast. Because women don't respond to lectures. They respond to energy they can't manipulate. The key to this whole thing is consistency. Your tone stays the same, whether things are smooth or tense. Your eye contact never breaks. Your breathing doesn't change. That emotional consistency becomes the standard that sets the boundary for you. She starts to realize if she brings noise, she gets distance. If she brings drama, she gets silence. If she brings chaos, she loses access. And it all happens without you ever yelling. Just quiet consequence that's delivered with calm masculinity. You also stop justifying your boundaries. That's where a lot of men go wrong. They try to over-explain their standards. But when you're grounded, you don't ask for permission to protect your peace. You don't need her to agree. You just decide, I don't do emotional disrespect. I don't stay in rooms where I'm being talked down to. If it costs my dignity, it's too expensive. And you walk. That silent exit, that calm withdrawal, that's a boundary she'll feel more deeply than any angry speech ever could. Here's what happens when you live this way. People either elevate to meet your standard, or they disappear. And either way, you win. Because boundaries aren't about keeping everyone in, they're about filtering the wrong ones out. And when a woman realizes she has to rise to keep your energy, when she feels that your silence isn't avoidance but discipline, she starts taking your presence seriously. She softens. She starts checking herself. She becomes more emotionally aware. Because she knows you don't stay where you're disrespected, and you don't raise your voice to prove a point. The man who can remain calm while drawing hard lines is the man who carries true emotional authority. He doesn't posture, he doesn't beg, He doesn't try to win arguments, he just enforces his peace with his pace, with his silence, with his absence. And that level of restraint is unforgettable, because now, she's not scared of your temper, she's aware of your emotional standards. She knows you don't explode, you exit. And that exit, it holds more power than any raised voice ever could. Let me know when you're ready for the final 10 paragraphs, and I'll complete this script with how to maintain these boundaries long-term, without control, without guilt, and without breaking character. When you carry this type of grounded silence, you stop needing to win interactions. You realize that emotional boundaries are not about proving anything to her, they're about proving something to yourself. Every time you hold your peace under pressure, every time you choose stillness over defensiveness, every time you remove yourself without an argument, you're telling yourself, I choose me first. That repetition builds confidence, it builds trust with your own instincts, and that self-trust becomes your armor. Not to harden you, but to remind you that you're never trapped, you're in charge of your internal world, and that's when women start responding to you differently, because now you're not seeking control, you are control. You also learn something powerful. Silence exposes what words hide. When you stop reacting with explanations and instead allow your boundaries to speak through behavior, people's true colors show. The woman who was used to manipulating with tone, with guilt, with passive aggression, she quickly starts to realize that doesn't work on you. And when you don't flinch, when you don't collapse, when you don't turn into a boy desperate for harmony, you become the one person in her life she can't emotionally dominate. That changes everything. Because now, she either adjusts or ejects. And either way, you've protected your soul without ever raising your voice. The secret here is emotional pacing. You move slowly. You speak with pause. You reply only when your energy has caught up to your words. And that pace creates tension. It forces the other person to feel your presence instead of reacting to your noise. That kind of man becomes unforgettable because he makes people pay attention to his pauses, to his energy, to the weight of his presence. And when a woman sees that you don't race to meet her chaos, but instead require her to meet your calm, you're no longer just a man she's dating. You become the standard she wasn't ready for. This type of boundary also protects her, not just you. Because when you hold space instead of exploding, when you lead with calm instead of control, when you withdraw without resentment, you create a dynamic that allows her to reset herself. You don't punish her with aggression, you challenge her with silence, and that space gives her time to feel her own energy, to reflect, to realize she crossed the line without you ever shaming her. That's how you grow people through your presence instead of breaking them with your pressure. That's real masculine leadership, invisible but unmistakable. A man who can set boundaries without volume doesn't operate from insecurity. He operates from internal certainty. He's not afraid of losing her. He's not afraid of being misunderstood. He's not afraid of temporary distance, because he knows that any love which requires him to abandon his peace isn't love, it's dependency. So he enforces space not to create fear, but to protect mutual dignity. That kind of man, he doesn't need to yell, because his absence echoes louder than his voice ever could. And make no mistake, brother, this kind of silence gets noticed. Not just by women, but by everyone. Your friends, your co-workers, strangers. They start treating you differently, because they can feel that your calm isn't weakness, it's choice. They sense you're not holding back out of fear, but out of respect for your own frequency. That type of man doesn't walk into a room needing approval. He walks in as if he already belongs. And when someone tests him, they quickly learn that respect is the only form of currency that keeps his attention. Sometimes the strongest boundary isn't what you say, it's what you no longer respond to. That message you didn't reply to, that argument you didn't entertain, that tone you didn't absorb, that emotional jab you didn't swing back at. All of those quiet refusals become lessons. They show people exactly how to treat you. Because when you stop reacting, you start leading. And the man who leads emotionally, not reactively, becomes the emotional mirror that women admire, even when they don't understand why. You don't have to be cold to be firm. You don't have to be distant to be respected. You just have to be unshaken. You can smile while holding a line. You can be loving while protecting your space. You can be soft without being available to chaos. That's the art, staying open, but untouchable to disrespect. And when you hold that balance, that's when you become emotionally irreplaceable. Because women don't remember the guy who yelled the loudest. They remember the man who never lost his voice, even when everyone else tried to make him. So when you feel tension rising, don't escalate, elevate. Go quieter, go slower, drop your shoulders, breathe deeper. Let your stillness carry the boundary. And if she's worthy of your presence, she'll meet you there. Not through force, but through feeling your power in the silence. That's when you'll see how much leadership lives in pause, and how the men who master that pause never have to raise their voice to be heard. Because in the end, man, the strongest emotional boundaries are not built with volume, they're built with value. The value you place on your peace, on your space, on your standards. And when you move like a man who refuses to trade that value for temporary validation, everyone around you adjusts. Some pull away, some rise up. But you stay calm, stay consistent, stay in control, and that quiet control, that's what makes you unforgettable.